Okay, I think we're live for the latest edition of the Data Value Show. Today we're really excited to have John Cooke back speaking. So we're going to talk about accelerating digital twin analytics with AI. John, welcome back.
Hi, Chris. Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much for having me on again. It's been a while, but obviously been a keen follower of your show, which we always have great topics and guests on. So we're very honoured to be amongst them.
Oh no, it's always a pleasure. As I said on there, our chats at our local over in Hackney are always entertaining, and they go a lot longer than an hour as well.
They do. Quite heated in a good way.
Well, yeah, passionate. I think passionate, and that's what I love about. When we have these conversations and talk about what you're working on, there's a load of passion in the topic. So we're going to share that with some of the people on the show. So obviously I know you very well. For the audience that don't know you, do you want to give yourself an introduction?
Yeah, sure. So my name's John Cooke. I am the founder of Dataception, and we are really an AI and sort of data product first company. Been around for almost 6 years in March, so which is kind of cool. And what we do is basically effectively business process, but from a data and analytics perspective. So a lot of like end-to-end AI, a lot of data products, like product methodologies. We've got a whole consultancy product called the Data Product Pyramid, which we're actually building product around to accelerate, which we'll talk a little bit around now. And basically a lot of time we get in to say, do the art of the possible and kind of start prototyping stuff, which we'll talk a lot about today. But yeah, very much around sort of that sort of product-led kind of mindset, but also we do data architecture and classic kind of data technology consulting as well. So we've done about 10 AI projects, which are really cool. Obviously doing a lot of LLM like everyone else is. So Joe says we look like digital twins.
Yes, we did say earlier that we had a couple of eggheads on the show. So mine's a little bit more. Yeah, I'm going to polish one a bit more for today. But
well, grass doesn't grow on a busy street, I always say. So
yes, yeah. We'll follow up on that on Wednesday when we catch up.
Hey, Ramona. Hey, Joe.
I'm from Milo as well. So, yeah, shout out to Joe and to Milo and Ramona, who have already commented. So when we first, and great you mentioned about the data products. When we first started speaking, data products were the big unknown of working out, trying to unpack what was a data product, what was a data product, where data mesh fit into it. And there was some great discussions on that. But I think the key thing that we always went back to is business processes, and I loved that. I'd call it the forgotten art, like data modeling. Is people don't actually understand what their business processes are, and even if they are documented, they're normally very out of date because the overhead of creating these business processes for large organizations is normally done when a transformation happens or an acquisition happens. And then after that, every department doesn't communicate back. It's never centrally maintained. And we've always talked about reverse engineering these. Like, okay, can we get that stuff and get that log and bring it up? And this is where you said, "Yeah, I've been doing some of that, Chris." And I think the latest thing is dogs, right? So dogs are dogs are back, right? And do you want to like a bit of a set the scene on?
Sure. Yeah.
What you're referring to as a dog?
Yeah.
Why it's different than a dag, and all the rest.
No worries. So I'll set the scene and kind of what sort of brought this whole thing on. And hey Russell, just shout out Russell on there as well. So one of the interesting things is I've always been brought in for the last 20, 30 years. I'm a technologist, but I get brought in and I always ask tricky questions to business people. I say, right, how is this thing going to work? How are you actually going to do your processes kind of stuff? So I always end up drawing process diagrams. Almost every gig I've been into. Look, because I'm always saying, well, actually, we're not to design a system to do that, whether it's an analytical system, AI, or if it's a transactional system, always the same thing. And one of the things we've been looking at doing is basically how do we accelerate that process? So what normally happens, you go in and you basically draw like a nice flow chart. and I must admit, I'm old school. I still draw flowcharts, right? Diamond boxes for decisions and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Went through the whole rational process and what have you. But
Logical person.
Yeah, exactly. I'm also visual.
I'm the same. Yeah.
Exactly. I'm also a visual person. It's always got to draw something up, right? And even when we're doing analytics, I want to do a machine learning model, or I want to do a bunch of prescriptive metrics or what have you. I want to know how they all connect together. And obviously, I've done a lot of work. I've been 30 years on the transactional side of it as well, which is also do a lot of object orientation as well. That's right. So what I've been doing is basically probably the last year or two is really still drawing my process diagrams, but actually thinking how can we actually accelerate those and actually from the whiteboard to the code. Fundamentally, how do we transpose those diagrams from drawing them up on a nice whiteboard, not spending 6 months to actually design the code, because the code is basically to try and realize that diagram, right? And obviously in the data world, there's we've had DAGs, just directed acyclical graphs, which Spark and the big processing engines were used, right? So you basically have I want to take this data set, I want to then do some transformation, basically build a pipeline, do a transformation, do some work, and I go across this big processing graph. Now, in the business process world, it's very rarely linear, right? I want to do a payment, so and the payment doesn't go through, I want to go back and that kind of stuff. So we're trying to overlay a different kind of business process, but a machine and human readable and executable business process. And if you use object orientation, we have that already, right? So we have basically an object graph. Basically, I have a class that represents a customer, or I can do things to that customer, or I can add new customers, this kind of stuff. And that customer potentially represents a payment transaction, and it links to another class and links to another class. And you get this big dependency hierarchy of objects which have data on them, but they also have methods, functions you can actually execute on them. And I did a prototype this way probably about 10 years ago, and I was in finance. And in finance, you basically when you want to price up a whole portfolio, you've got different algorithms for pricing up things like a swap or a trade or an FX and that kind of stuff. And what you end up with is this big graph of execution nodes, effectively, of objects around portfolios. So if I get a new currency pair rate, an FX rate, for instance, and I change it, I want to reprocess the whole graph and reprocess the whole thing. But use algorithms, what we call quant libraries, for actually processing those. And I thought, well, actually, can we actually then bring that whole concept into the data world? And what's also really, really interesting, and I'll get onto this in a second, when you start talking about AI agents and agentic kind of things, you watch the agents are doing this kind of work almost implicitly. So we're actually trying to so there's kind of this interesting perfect storm of bringing end-to-end business process together, having this kind of object graph capability, and also the agentic kind of world all coming together, coalescing, thinking actually this is what I do day to day. I do business process. Can we actually accelerate that business process, that diagram, using all these techniques, and not spend 6-12 months actually building them out? And the dog really is that kind of zenith of that piece. So taking the object graph kind of concept, applying it not just to data but to transaction as well. So you could have a graph that basically takes a payment in, does a forecast, generates a report with an LLM, and each one of those steps is effectively a component in it, like a class, but there's actually it could be a full component. Like you could call that to ChatGPT, or you could actually run a pricing algorithm, or you could run a little metric, or you could run a workflow or something like that. And this is what we're trying. This is what the dog really is about getting that business representation, or that machine readable representation of that business program, which is executable and prototypable, which we'll get to in a second. So that's really what the concept is.
So and some people out there with the accent, dogs aren't dags unless you're in certain places,
Yes.
Unless you've watched some Guy Ritchie films that we were talking about earlier. Snatch, you may think that they're the same thing. So dogs are different than dags.
Yes.
And so would you say that, and I love that, giving that objects, classes, and how you, especially my newfound skills in Python recently, we've been doing some coding, dusting off my memory of it. Right. What when you define a function or object, you can do certain things on that. And would you say that is the DAG a business processes that is then orchestrating the activities within the dog? Would you say the DAG is cutting through a path of dog objects that can actually navigate you through a business process.
So we take a step back. A DAG, a directed acyclical graph, is an executable process, right? Fundamentally, it's directed, so because it goes one way.
Yep.
And it's acyclic. It doesn't actually go back on itself.
Okay.
So a dog can go any way and can go back on itself. So they're the same sort of concept. It's just what the DAG is typically used for data work. It works very well because data work typically is a linear execution. I do A plus B plus C, then C, then D, or whatever. And I don't go back on myself because recursion inside data is a nightmare.
So the dogs manage that part. The DAG manages the activities from that and just the stage.
Well,
steps
so
you need to.
You think about dog. The way of positioning a dog is actually a business process. It's a high level. It's a way of orchestrating high level components in an end-to-end business process. Now, one of those steps in the business process could execute a data process. It could call a Spark job, for instance, that executes a pipeline. So you could have a DAG underneath as one of the steps. Because the thing about graphs is you can have graphs within subgraphs, that kind of stuff. So if I was to say, right, I want to do some demand gen, for instance, for my sales. I want to execute a metric. The first thing to understand what my previous 12 months was. So I might actually fire out that first step to go and get the metric that's executed by Spark. That might execute a little DAG underneath it, saying actually do a scan across my sales and then do some data transformation and then bring the result back to that first step in the dog. And then that goes into say, well, we've got the previous one. Let's put it into a machine learning model, which actually can do like a regression, do like a forecast or a time series or what have you. Right. Okay. So then that might execute its own processing paradigm in it, which might have a little small pipeline in it as well. So and then comes back, and then you say, actually, I want to give a report, of what my forecast could be. You fire it over to Anthropic, and it actually generates the report and then brings back. So dogs at that kind of big process step level. You might have, in each of the sub-steps, you might have small little pipelines and other types of processing models underneath to be able to actually execute the specific of it. So you're breaking down the big end-to-end thing into kind of big composable chunks, and then you're firing off to other components. In the agentic world, they're called tools, but it's the same process. It could be data products in our parlance. Like I said, it could be a metric, it could be a machine learning algorithm, it could be whatever. It could be firing off to Salesforce or a COTS application to do some work to come back. But very much that is that orchestration level.
Yep. I haven't liked the word COTS product for a while. You take it back to my architect. I had to quickly commercial off the shelf for anyone that.
Yes. So your big ERP or off the Oracle financial system, or there's big monolithic applications which everyone says agents is going to disrupt in the next 10 years. But I'll believe that when I see it. But you might have to do. So you might have something in Salesforce. You might want to go and get some data out of Salesforce and do some processing in Salesforce, or you might want to do some transactional updates or something. So that's the thing. The dog is really at that orchestration level, but business process. So if you look at it and you sort of squint, you can actually recognize the full business process rather than kind of a full technical, data flow diagram, which no business person will understand. And it's at the lower level.
So going back to my old business process or BPM mapping and things like that. So we talk about different levels of it, and from memory, I can't really see. So level one is probably just a finance level or something. It's that sort of like it's just a block. Mm-hmm. Whereas underneath it, you'll go down to I think level 5. I believe it's down to the code, and there'll be a number of layers of abstraction between them. What level are you working at with the business processes that you're like prototyping?
So you're probably down at level 2, probably level 2 or 3. So you're not at the very kind of macro level, because you actually have the idea is you're actually delivering executable process. So it can't be at the conceptual level. It's actually got to be at the level where you can actually execute, an end-to-end outcome. So think about UX process, right? So imagine a user journey, right? So you do the user journey. Same with this, you do the user journey, and then you build a wireframe with an information map of the user journey in the screens. That's the level we're at fundamentally. You're at full workflow type level. Because it's got to be executable and it's got to be actually used components. And the idea is that you get this up very quickly with a user interface, with sample data, ideally data from the actual, organization. But obviously we know sometimes how difficult that get hold of that is. But the idea is you want to simulate the process as close to kind of what the business want, what they think they want, or what they think they might like. And again, they're quite distinct. And you want to prototype that very, very quickly and get it up front to them very, very quickly and iterate around on it. And this is the key thing. This is really where AI and agentic stuff really comes in. I mean, because beforehand doing this, we've done it. It does take weeks, sometimes months to actually do that piece, right? But with agentic AI and the stuff that we're building, we can actually generate that entire top thing in 30 minutes. We can describe it as a prompt, get something that's good enough in front of a business person, and we've done this a number of times. With the UI to make it real, because even business process, a lot of business people don't. It's not something that they really understand. So you want a user interface, you want a back end process, and you want example data that's good enough. You want to get it out in front of people and end to end as well. Fundamentally, this is really, you see this. This is kind of part of the game changing that's happening with agents and AI. You look at Lovable and all these other applications that are coming out, which are fully generated. You're not spending a lot of time boilerplating stuff, and you don't want to do that when you're prototyping. When you're trying stuff out, you want to do it quickly, cheaply. And you want to do it end to end. You can't go up and say, here's a learning model with a scatter plot. It's like, oh, the business go, well, so what, right? What does this mean? How's this going to affect my sales? How's it going to optimize my teams? It's that type of thing.
And it's that preventing technical debt as well on that journey as well, because if you do something they liked and you've knocked it together, think, oh yeah, that's great. And now you want the next thing. You think, well, hold on, I need to go back and address some of the foundational pieces. So with your approach, you're getting, even though it's prototyping, you're prototyping on foundational pieces that you don't have to go back to because you're automating or reusing assets. So exactly. I made some comments here as well. So really, this is promoting the reuse of assets, because once you've got an object that can do these things, and someone comes along, I want that, but I need to do this as well. Okay, right. You take that off the shelf, extend it, and then you put it back in. We're the owner, but that whole pull request sort of approach of collectively working on parts of the platform that may be owned by other people, but they allow other people to contribute to them. And I think also with understanding where this is being used, you can probably get a heat map of, oh bloody God! Everyone's calling this thing here. This has become a hot class, Well, maybe Bikram yoga style. It's a hot club anyway. So you've got a focus on that one. You need to probably harden that one a little bit more. And I think the next non-comment is that speed to value. And if you can get something in front of someone and demonstrate. And this is where the digital twin comes into it. It's okay. You do this at the moment. You got Bob, Susan, Jeffrey, and all these other people working on it. It takes this amount of time, and and this is the time it takes you to do X number of processes, orders, or whatever. There you go. Now with this approach, it's quicker, faster. You don't need as many people. It's an easy comparison. It's all that evidencing thing I like to talk about, is that if you can't evidence it, it's just architecture, or it's just just someone's opinion, and opinion. And the comment about opinions, everyone's got one.
Indeed, I know the joke, but this is the point, right? So you've got to show something real or real enough. Fundamentally, and we've all done POCs, we've all done prototypes, we've all done pilots, we've all done stuff that we've knocked together. It's fantastic, and the business that's really great. As long as they don't start poking at the data, which sometimes they do, because they get lost in the data. If it's too good, they get lost in the data, which can be happening. But then you've got the parts of production, which is 6-12 months, or sometimes not at all, because it's too difficult, right? So the thing that we've done is, with these object graphs, we've actually combined them with what we call data products, which are these reusable components. So fundamentally, we are, so you do a sales forecast, you want to put that as a component that someone else can reuse, right? Fundamentally. And because we use our process, our approach, our data product pyramid process, to actually design and break down and decompose the sample process, you can actually have these reusable components from you can prototype with them fundamentally. So you build these 4 or 5 components, or 10 components, or 20 components, whatever it is. You prototype them really quickly within minutes. Some of them, right? You throw them up. You get at UI and say, these are actually the ones. These are the components that we're actually using. If you've got some already, like a microservice or something in the warehouse, you can reuse those. So you bring those in actually into your prototype, which is again super important. So you actually use something that's real.
Yeah.
And so and then you iterate around, and then when you finish, you go, actually, this has it proved the value. So the hypothesis around this new business process actually works. You've proved some of the feasibility, which is super important. You've done it really quickly, and then you've broken down the process. You've done this kind of object oriented process. You've actually said, right, data teams, tech teams, these are the components you need to build. This is what we've prototyped. Now, obviously, they need to be hardened with data quality rules and all the other bits and pieces around. But this is what it is, and we can actually generate almost a specification using an LLM. Here's the components. We've got them all written, and they're all in metadata in our tool and in JSON. And actually, then it spits out effectively a full spec and go, right, go and build those. Yep. Or you can do it interactively, which is really interesting. Right, we need a machine learning algorithm to do a regression. Our data science team over in marketing, can you actually build a market forecast one quickly? Just here's the interface. Just do the regression. Come back in a couple of days. Plug that in. Let's see if that works. Team in sales, team in finance. Can you go and build it so you can actually get that collaboration in there? If you want to get a bit longer, you bring everyone in. Again, these are prototype type stuff, but you get the team involved in actually doing this. So it's super important.
There's a few questions I'll come back to as well, but I just wanted to know where's the data fit into this, because we've got entities, we've got the attributes on them, we've got the relationships on them, we've got the ownership of that data that's that thing we're having, and obviously business processes will either own the creation of some of that data. It may have a requirement on the consumption of that data, or it may require multiple entities and combining them as a transformation logic or something that it needs. So how's that mapped into your approach?
That's a very good point. So what we do is we take the data that we need for each component. So we don't do any kind of real foundational, a lot of foundational work, subject areas, domain. We don't need that. Because what we're doing, we're taking data out of the various different systems. They could be analytical systems like warehouses, or they could be transactional systems. We then package them because we use this sort of data product concept as a microservice. We take the data in we need for that microservice fundamentally. So actually, we try and use the data, model the data on a component by component basis. So the data architecture kind of changes, very microservice oriented. We take the data we need for those microservices. We also have a catalog which basically says, we can map them to business process. And the really interesting thing, once you start mapping data to component to business process, you've got a direct linkage. So the curation and all the sort of context is there. I've used these 5 fields from our sales system to generate the forecast. I can see. It's a bit like Kaggle. If you know Kaggle, is you look at the data sets they use for their projects, for their competition. You know what people are using. And actually that shortens the whole kind of data architecture and data curation piece, because you know them and you can tag them to the business process in there as well. So this is really important, because again, if you go to the agentic world, this is what agents do, right? They go and find the data they want. They basically work out what they need, and then they execute their process inside their own state memory, right? Fundamentally. So this we're following. Well, we were doing this first, but we had the same sort of pattern. We take the data out that we need. We tag it with the component on the business process, so you know what that's being used. And the classic one is like a customer record, right? Know there's 15 different business processes all take different bits of the customer record. We don't need to model a customer record, because we can actually say you've got 3 sales systems. We take the 4 or 5 attributes for this part of the business process out of each of those sales systems. We union them, and another part of the process might take another 4 or 5 attributes out of those sales systems. But we know them because you've got them tagged to the business process. So you haven't lost them in the middle of a data platform or a kind of this translation between an intermediate formats, all this kind of stuff. You've got them there, so you get this very fast and very highly curated, actually, because you created it as part of the process.
So you're building an abstraction really from the data where it's persisted in its golden source, that we call it, really, where that data is. And there's an abstraction layer. Okay, well, I'm using these bits and where it's tagged that, we need to make sure that's always kept up to date, you'll then go and write back that data to where that golden source is, because your business processes has updated that.
There's a direct linkage between so there's not, we do have an abstraction layer, but it's more like a data virtualization. It's more, we're not abstracting it in a kind of data arc, global data model type. Enterprise
no,
data.
Sorry. So, yeah. So,
I know what you mean.
An access layer. So,
yeah, exactly right. Yes. So we unified access layer.
Rather than
that hooks into the actual systems of record, truth, whatever you want to call them. And then as where possible, because obviously it's not always possible. And it hooks into those, and then you basically have a direct mapping between that and the thing you're using it for, which in my mind is something that's always missing.
Yeah.
Has been missing for a long many years, so you get that kind of stuff.
So, and just thinking out loud a little bit here. So we've got this access abstraction layer we're talking about now. So we've got a finance system, we've got a e-commerce system, we've got a product system, we've got a number of these different systems. They're all siloed, they're all operational systems, some of them COTS, and bring back that word again. Yeah, some of them, maybe some homegrown ones, but they're there's no relationship between each of these systems at a data model level, because they're all in different phases. But there is actually a relationship between them at a business level or at your access layer level.
Well, at the business, this is the key point, Chris. You actually hit the nail on the head. The connective tissue is the business process. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get back to that connective tissue. What typically happens, you try and create a sort of almost like an artificial connective tissue through data modeling and homogenization and all that kind of stuff. And you lose that. You always lose something, right, with that. There's a loss of business. And we're trying to actually get back to the fact where we're only using the connecting data to each other via the business process.
I'm going to go there, and Bill may shoot me down for saying this anyway, but so it's Billerman's modeling approach from when we defining that enterprise layer where you're putting all that data in different places. It won't be set far as saying you're building a virtual version of that. So it's a virtual version of
Chris, it's not a data modeling process. And I think this is the fun thing we need. It's a process modeling process.
Yes.
It's not actually data modeling. The data, so microservices isn't a data modeling exercise, right? It's you have executable components for your business process, either reusable services or you have ones that hook into the specific parts of the business process, and each one of those has its own little data model for its own uses, and that's so you're actually process modeling with the data in order to do that. I mean the Inman models and these are data modeling things across. So I think let's that cross domain word is probably so you're creating a cross domain linked to business processes data objects. So we're basically creating business objects, not the products, with their own data state in them.
Yeah.
And you're not trying to join the state between outside of those objects.
No. Okay. So you'd have an object for customer, an object for product, an object for.
Well, we'd have an object for a process step, and again, this is quite different. We don't have a customer object because actually customer means a different thing for different processes.
Right. Okay. So my sales it could be a supplier. It could be but it's where you've got it from. Okay.
Exactly the same. So with the sales system that captures the CRM for that particular sales process captures the front end. It's a source of record for the customer. But actually, marketing use some attributes, operations use some attributes, finance will use different attributes. So there's no. So you're not trying
to make one size fits all. You've created the granularity of these things. So they got the right amount of attributes at the right time with the right granularity.
Yeah. We've got a couple of questions. Is it worth?
I was just going to go to that as well. Right. So let's go with Nick first of all, and we'll get to Ramona afterwards. Here we go. John Cooke, can you still see a place for pre-prototype validation activities, e.g. sketch on a piece of paper before going to a quick prototype? What do you think of prototype? I'll go on. Questions for you. So
So without being too salesy, Nick, normally no, but without all yes. So we've developed a canvas that you can actually do replacing like a Figma or a Canva type thing where you can actually prototype stuff really, really quickly. But normally you can't do that. You have to do a piece of paper or whiteboard or what have you. But we've actually developed a tool to actually do that. And also it won't be just the business, it won't be just the back end process. It will be the front end as well, and also the data. So we've got a way of actually type in a prompt. I want to create an end-to-end risk process as these metrics and yada yada yada. Generates the back end process, generates the user interface, and generates sample data around those as well. So the fact that we can do that in like 3 or 4 minutes, we can throw that up in front of a business person saying, here, this is what your process looks like. Here's the interface that actually makes it real for them. Here's the back end process, and I can show you kind of an example of what we look like. You know, we've got a 3D canvas that actually prototypes that in front of them, and that really accelerates it. And we've done it a few times with people, and it's like, you know, it replaces largely replaces the piece of paper. But without that tool, you're absolutely right. You draw on a piece of paper or a whiteboard or, you know, offline.
It brings it to life. I know Nick's shout out Nick. I've been to some of our meetups before, and I know he's focused on helping understand people understand the data product world, I believe. So some training.
Nick's an awesome data product manager who builds, you know, customer facing genuine products, so that I can. There
you go. You got a shout out from John there, Nick. Here you go. He doesn't give them out too easy, you know. So, let's go to Ramon as well, and then we got Andrew's got some clarification on Andrew's comment. How do you adapt the system to new components joining into the process? Do you have to manually adapt it entire hierarchy, or are you aware of automating this?
So that's a fantastic question. So one of the things is this ability and agility to actually do it. So we've got 2 ways of doing it. One, we've got the canvas. We can just drag a new component on there really, really quickly, really easy, and we can change stuff around. Also, we use an AI to do this as well. So we can actually ask it to like change this process, add these new bits and pieces into it, and it generates the new dog, the new data object graph, which is the core of our platform. Fundamentally, we get to generate new things, and we can actually.
Is that called the puppy, by the way? Yeah. When you generate the new dog.
Yeah, I mean the whole platform's called Pack Runner, which is because it's a multi-agent type thing. It's a pack running in the whole thing, but well, that's the working title anyway. But yeah, this is a really, really important point, Ramon. It's this ability to kind of prototype stuff and change stuff, because things change all the time, and what you don't want is basically build a really nice sparkling new business process with the tool, and you know, and then something happens, like, you know, there was a very unusual, you know, election in another country that changes the whole macro thing, and then suddenly you can't respond, and you know, so absolutely spot on to be able to actually change it really quickly, really easy, using AI to help do that as well. So I've had a look at this particular scenario. Can you tell me what this business process needs to change in your mind to actually do it? And the LLM will come back and say, oh, actually change this, add this, do this. And then you reiterate around and actually do it. Now we're also working on a dynamic version for agents. So, you know, agents at the moment, there's sort of 2 schools of thought around how agents work, right? AI agents. There's what we call and it's all in my mind, the planning phase. We've got the probabilistic and the deterministic. You know, most agents are probabilistic. They'll give it to an LLM and it says, actually, I'll come up with a new way, the plan of doing stuff. But actually, if I ask it 3 times, it might come up with different ones. And we've seen with Parsha and a few other companies, they've gone especially highly prescriptive and regulated workflows, they don't work. So what you want to be able to do is come up with a more prescriptive one, but obviously that takes a lot longer and you have to do that kind of stuff. So we're working as on a dynamic dog. Superhero.
I was thinking of Hong Kong Fooey.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, the scope for kind of, you know, for making fun is immense, which is really good. But this idea of where you have this kind of query plan, so you give it to an agent, and like a database, where you ask it for a query, it comes up with a query plan which it can tune. Mm-hmm. We use the dog to query plan the agent, and we're working on that at the moment. And that's kind of bleeding edge stuff, but really, really interesting. So you get the best of both worlds. So you know what the agent's actually executing, what it's doing, but also, you know, you get that kind of predictability, and you know, you can get human in the loop and all that type of stuff.
So Andrew's looking for a clarification. I think he's not sure. It's good description. So no canonical model, just relationship between local context.
Yes, yeah, in a very technical. So basically, the component is, I think, it's something that does something on the business process, and that has its own context. You're absolutely spot on. Yeah. So
yeah, I like that description.
And you're basically joining it across the service contracts.
Yeah.
So you've got, you know, like microservices
for the payload that's actually part of that particular service, and your relationship to
for that particular part of the business process. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And I think there's another one from Andrew as well. So, quick question there. So, are macro process behaviors more important than domain models?
I personally think so. Yes, I think the work that I always end up doing is building up the business process. So the process to me is the king. The problem with process, traditionally, it's too difficult and too hard and takes too long to do, right? And it gets out of date. And what we're trying to do is shortcut that ability to create that process by using AI and tooling to actually generate all the boilerplate stuff, to actually so you're not spending like months and years to kind of doing stuff. Be able to prototype it quickly so you can test it out.
So
And then bring in the data you need.
So the word canonical model just brings back sort of like memories from a project at a very large payment company that was born out of a bank that was in Scotland that had to be bailed out. So
yes, make of that what you will. Yes.
Yeah, and from that, we came up. It's brand new. I had to do a whole acquiring platform, and and all that knowledge was embedded in a mainframe that was in someone else's data center at that point. And so to that task, a canonical model was one of the approaches that was used to try and carve up the elephant, should we say?
Yeah.
And the main challenge there was terminology. You have terminology from different card providers. Terminology, and even between different departments.
Yeah.
And you define that canonical model. It just takes ages to refine it. Oh, okay. Well, hold on. We're talking about a supplier. Oh, we're talking about a customer. Oh, it's a party. Oh, okay. So we can reuse party now for this same one. Oh, so now I need these attributes for my virtual party. Need these attributes. And that time and iterating through that refinement of those attributes, and just to degree, is it a shared entity? Is it a separate? Is it? And that takes ages, and it's those things that then become a challenge then to as you're on this journey. So how you've solved many problems, but is that something that you see as still a big problem, and how do you see as addressing that challenge?
Yeah, no, absolutely spot on. I've been down that route. I did a counterparty system, a reference data system for a large German bank 12, 15 years. I mean, exactly the same problem, right? The problem is when you that comes about, and it comes about when you try and do we're trying to homogenize data outside of business process. That happens a lot, right? You look at MDM world, look at that kind of stuff. It's basically we've got these 3 or 4 different things from, and we're trying to merge them into one thing to get so we can understand it, right? Fundamentally. And the thing that always got me is I said, well, like I said, the customer record. The customer is not. The customer record is not one thing for the whole organization. So why are we trying to homogenize it? Now you need to understand if you've got 3 sales systems and you want to be able to do a metric across all 3 of those, you need to somehow kind of merge them, right? You need to basically say, I need to understand. So there's always going to be some level of merge, NC resolution, but it's point usage. And that whole canonical problem you're talking about typically happens when we try and take a step back and go, actually, let's try and build a customer record outside of the business process to actually, because merge it back together before we go out to the business process. And that bit, exactly as you said, Chris, is the big problem, right? It becomes very, very difficult because you're trying to homogenize stuff, concepts which actually aren't business concepts.
No,
they're actually data concepts, because it makes them easy to get my head around them to actually put them into this. And I think this is the key challenge, fundamentally. But if you don't do it in the business process, you still always have to do some part of that, like I said, because there's always cross-domain kind of stuff. There's always native IDs and native kind of things that we have to map them through to the business process. But if you map them through the business process, it actually becomes a lot easier, because the context is not a sort of data context. It's a business context.
You're actually getting the mapping free of charge, because if you just agree at an individual business process level what these things are, and then you have to go map it to where you're getting that stuff from.
Exactly.
Do you care that it's in? Do you care that it's actually called party, or do you care it's actually called supplier, or do you care it's called?
Right.
But your data modelers, and maybe I'm guilty, a shard. We go, I'm gonna model that correctly. That's a party, and they're going to reuse that same entity.
Yeah.
And that's a thing to do, right? It's a physicalization, and the business don't really care about visualization. So if you
yeah,
talk to them in their language,
yeah,
and you don't have to bother with, you can collect the attributes that are required for it and build it up over time.
exactly. But it's also one thing. I know this is going to sound quite spiky, controversial. We're still kind of in database thinking. Really, where we still are in data, we're still in, and you know, and what I'm trying to do is break out a sort of database, and we all do it, right? Because we can't. There's no way a person can visualize end-to-end business process in a large organization. There's just absolutely no way to do it. The only one can do it, put it all in one place, either on a diagram or a database, whatever. And that's always going to be the challenge. But what we're trying to do is actually break that kind of model. I mean, the mesh tried to do this about data mesh. It was that's very much where it came from. But it kind of focused on the wrong bit, which is about sharing data.
I think that's where you had your difference of opinions, wasn't it? Like,
oh, absolutely. For me, this was always exactly right. One of the many. But for me, this was always the nub of the problem. It's like, because the whole thing around, you know, we in IT and data, we're subservient to the business. We supply software, data, or technology, or transactional to support business process. That's what we do. So, you know, and I think this is what we're trying to get back to, and be able to break that down. And as I've done a lot of microservices work, which is all about basically the systemization of business process in technology, right? And that's what microservices do. They map into, and the orchestration bit is actually the most important bit. It's not actually the services themselves; it's actually the getting the end to end from the business flow. So we're trying to get back to that. Got a question from Ramon. I think we've.
oh yeah, sorry.
On there.
I missed that one. Yeah, did I miss that one?
Yeah. So.
Oh, okay. Sorry, yeah, there you go. Oh, yeah. Of course, you missed out. It's a plug. It's a plug for your product.
I want to be fair.
No, you know, I'm joking. It's not. You know, I'm joking.
So you're absolutely right, Ramon. So what we're trying to do is exactly right. We're basically trying to accelerate that ability to create that end-to-end process. We use LLMs and prompts to actually generate the first bit, but then we can actually iterate around. And we use a canvas to do that, or a bunch of canvases, one for the UI, one for the back end, and we're developing one for data. We're also using markup in as well, so we're trying to shortcut the way to describe that. So we get the LLM to actually generate, or the agent to generate the markup, and then that generates the rest of the thing. But we can iterate around, so it's not like we're completely black box where we say here's the LLM and go away and do it, and then we can't edit it because we always sometimes have to make changes, like actually, well, you think that's a forecast model, that's actually a regression model, and we need to change that, or we want to change the UI after business feedback, but we get the AI components to actually accelerate that with a canvas, which we can demonstrate back to the people. So that, and again, this is sort of the culmination of 3 or 4 different concepts coming together to try and get this full end-to-end kind of prototyping capability together.
So in the platform wars that we're living in at the moment, or cloud wars, or what you want to call it, and the multiple blenders, you know, they're not going to pick on one. They're eating into each other's areas, and you know, it wouldn't surprise me. I was thinking of this in fact, on my failed attempt to get back to London last night, I was sat next to a lady from Oracle. And obviously, you know, busman's holiday or whatever. Even when I'm on planes, I'm still talking about these things. And she was talking about Larry being 80 now, and he's still going on to these calls. But I was thinking about the beginning of it, because Oracle started as a database. You know, it was just a database.
Yeah.
And you know, on that, you know, that journey that Larry's taken that company, its application, it does. You know, it buys up every CRM going out there. It buys up, you know, all of the different accounting. It is an application company built on the foundations of the money made for a database, pretty much. And you know, the same things coming in you know, other vendors that are out and coming in that space. They're just going to be taking in more. So where I was getting to with this is, we've recently been taking the processes to the data. So, or we started to taking the processes to the data in these platforms. So, you know, but you know, the algorithms are coming to it now. Now the containerization coming to it now. Now other vendors in that same ecosystem be able to share their data there. Now what I wrote here was, you know, do we bring the data to the process, or are we taking the process to the data? And is there a world for both of it? So where do you see it going? I know which way the vendors want to obviously make it, because it makes sense. From an architecture perspective, how do you see this panning out?
So there's 2 dimensions to this. There's the physicalization of it. Basically, what you want to really ideally stop is movement of data, right? So that's where the movement, the taking the process of data. That's the whole Hadoop concept. It's basically, and you saw these hugely fragmented organizations where they're copying data between and data will get fragmented and get lost. And we've all been there, right? Banks are notorious for this, right? I was doing that, and you had the lineage diagrams were horrendous, and this kind of stuff. So there's that aspect of being able to, of not fragmenting data from a physical aspect, right, fundamentally. But then from a logical perspective, actually you want to bring the data to the process. So physically, you don't want to move data around. You don't want to fragment it and get lost and all that kind of silos and that kind of stuff. But logically, you want to do the opposite. You want to bring the data to the process because what we're trying to do is end-to-end business process. We're not trying to, and all the reasons we just talked about. So you've got to kind of marry those two worlds up. Fundamentally, where you're doing end-to-end business process, you're modeling at the process level, not at some homogenized data level, but you're not getting data off 4 or 5 different systems. The source data from system A, but you're actually picking out from system E, right? So from a physical perspective, and this is where I think data virtualization really comes into where you actually start hooking it. And again, if you look at the agentic world, what it's doing, what agents are doing with tooling, they're going straight into systems. They're not going through warehouses. They're going. They're obviously there's some with they sometimes need a bit of help. And good luck an agent trying to pick out an SAP data model. Right, that's a horrendous thing.
Well, he needs to learn German first, and then
exactly right.
And then he's heard of German abbreviations that are
exactly right. Well, LLMs are pretty good at that sort of stuff. So, but yeah. You're absolutely right. But so they will need assistance. But because they're dynamically generating their plans, what they're trying to do, they need to ascertain what data they need. And trying to package up data in traditional kind of ways and model it and this kind of stuff when they don't know what they're going to need, there's a massive amount of friction there. So from a physical perspective, you want to be able to hook in to I don't like the term raw, but everyone understands what raw means, right? The raw data from actual systems, but you want to be able to connect them end to end, from a processing perspective. And the other thing I would say as well, AI, we've done loads of AI projects. We've always needed pre-processed data. Fundamental. We've always need to get the raw data because you're trying to find out patterns in the data when they go through data processing models and kind of pipelines and platforms and 7-layer 3D medallion architecture. It's a lossy business. You lose all the information that you need for AI. Typically, we've seen that many times. We've had to go around it, because you don't care about each individual record, not like a payment, but you care about a number of them to find the right pattern so you can do the regression, this kind of stuff as well. So with the agentic stuff going and finding the data it needs and having that dynamism, and coupled with AI trying to actually get in the patterns, suddenly the world starts shifting a bit. So that's why you need hooks into transactional systems, ideally directly if you're allowed to do it, which is something that's changing. So you're not copying data through these 4 or 5 different systems, but you're actually joining it logically end to end. Well, that's quite a long-winded way of saying it.
No, there's. I've been thinking about how this all joins up as you were saying that. Anyway, so, and again, this is the technical. So the introduction of Iceberg recently, and it's been around a while, but it's becoming more mainstream and more of a standard pattern we're seeing now. Do you see? Is Iceberg one of the enablers that allows this to happen by having that ability to use Iceberg as a storage layer for everything, or part of virtualization, or is it it doesn't really matter, it makes no difference?
I'm going to be quite spiky. I don't think it matters.
Do it. This is why you're invited on the show. We don't like this.
I mean, ultimately, we were talking about back 15 years ago, Orc and Parquet and what we do, we hook directly into transactional systems through APIs and again, if you look at what agents are doing, they're hooking into straight to APIs. They're hooking into, it's the intermediate formats. And again, there's definitely advantage of doing it for performance and all this kind of stuff, right? So you bring data and you don't want to, necessarily query your e-commerce or your e-commerce system with, lots of agents because it performance with this. You might want to do some ephemeral storage in between. So that definitely will work. But you want to get access to the data in the systems as much as you can, right? So, like I say, if you use Iceberg and these kind of intermediate formats for ephemeral storage, fundamentally, but you need to keep them synchronized. And this is the other thing around it. Fragmentation is fine as long as data is synchronized. If it's not synchronized, then you're back to that whole kind of problem of we talked about with the banks and stuff. So yeah, it's interesting, but it's not it's not moving the dial enough at the business process level. It's useful. Like if you had a microservice that since you had DuckDB in it, right? That's using processing inside it, right? It gets data straight out the transactions, stores it in DuckDB, and you can actually then process it inside your microservice. Fantastic. That's great. That's great optimization for it. And I see Iceberg and those other things being an optimization. Really, it's not core game changer, but it is an optimization. So it's definitely useful. It's not.
It's a tool in the toolbox that can help with the implementation of the solution rather than it being an enabler to the solution.
Yeah, exactly right.
Okay, yeah. So Ramon said I asked a good question. It was like I didn't know which one it was. Although it's only one good question I've asked, I'm sure. But it was data to processes or processes to data. So where are you bringing the process to? So, yeah. So I'm trying to look. I've run out of my notes here. So it's well, that's what I mean. Well, I'll just do some shameless plugs for a couple of things. If you're in London, anyone this week, Wednesday, well, the data meetup's happening. Whether I make it there or not is another question. I had a failed attempt to fly back last night, so I'm trying again tonight. Weather issue. So yeah, hopefully I'm down there on the Wednesday. And with the data conference, it's heating up. Well, not heating up; it's cooling down. But so that's happening on the 7th of March. So with some announcements of the speakers and that happening there soon. But what else do we want to cover today on this last bit, John?
Nick's obviously asked a question when you can get a version for cat people. So we're going to be sort of demoing this stuff. We are demoing it at the moment. So we'll be over the next few weeks, which is all good. We're also about to launch a new version of the website, which has all the dog stuff in it. So all the dog posts I've done, there's about 20 or 30 of them. So we just launched that. So dataception.com, go to the blogs. There's a whole list of from dags to dogs and all that kind of stuff as well. So yeah, sorry, but doing a bit of plugging myself, so if that's all right.
Yeah, no, of course. I mean, I was just trying to see if there's a cots to cats. I was trying to think of an alternative to cots that we had cats in it as well, because you gotta have a meaning or some entertainment to these 3-letter acronyms that we have and use.
The dog stuff, we've had lots of fun with it, and there's so much more fun we can have. Who let the dogs out, and
exactly.
Chasing squirrels was my last dog post around probabilistic versus deterministic kind of planning that we talked about. So you chase the squirrels or follow the path. It's the gift that keeps on giving, shall we say?
So I'm probably just one closing thing, and this is always the challenge in everyone companies is over the years we've got some great ideas in the data world, and sometimes it's adoption is always the challenge of actually getting there, and the scaling of it adoption. So as soon as a company gets over a certain size, as soon as the departments go all different local, it just becomes much harder. So how do you see how are we going to overcome that challenge of scaling this approach? It's not my problem, it's yours actually. But how are you going to solve it?
No, it is. And absolutely right. I mean, there's 2 or 3 aspects. First of all, is the business change aspect of it. It's something that always gets missed, right? Fundamentally, we've fallen foul on this recently. We did a machine learning algorithm that did 99% accuracy, but it didn't get adopted because the business change wasn't there. It wasn't given as much love as it should have been, shall we say? So, first of all, I mean, the way you think about it, people who want to adopt AI, want to adopt these kind of rapid prototype, there needs to be an appreciation in the organization at the highest level that they're going to do this, right? You think about in the next 10 years, there's going to be 3 types of organizations. There's going to be an AI native organization which is built from the ground up on using SaaS and agents. There are going to be organizations which are older and more complex, but want to change and start changing stuff around the edges and kind of nibbling away at the business process. And then there'll be a third one, third type of organization that's got this, either it's in an industry that doesn't need it, or They don't want to change. So, but
I thought the three were going to be Amazon, Google, and Meta. The three types. That's it.
I know. I'm not brave enough to start naming names like that, mate. I tell you. But yeah, for those first, obviously, the first one is, that's going to be easy, right? You see there in Klarna and a few other places. We get a tool that actually can do an agentic tool that actually cut this business process. No brainer. I've got executive sponsorship. Just go and do it. The second one's the more interesting ones, how they actually do it, but they still have to have that, that buy-in from the top, that actually agent and AI based prototyping is a business change activity. And it's really interesting. If you go to that, even up to a couple of years ago, AI and analytics is still seen as a data thing.
Yeah.
The agentic thing is something really changing that conversation. Agentic is not a data and analytics discipline; it's a business change discipline, because it's end to end and it's this kind of stuff. So being able to educate and actually get people to convince the business people, the people who sign the checks, the people who have all the kind of organizational risk and all that sort of stuff to actually change is super, super important. This is now changing the business, and they want to be able to do it. So my example always is, you went to the head of sales, so I can increase your conversion rates from 5 to 1 to 3 to 1, but it means you change your sales process. Will they do it?
Yeah.
So and it's those kind of conversations. Now you can do that with prototyping, because you can show the art of the possible. You can show what it can be. You can show what the risks are and all that kind of stuff. You can give people a really good, way of actually deciding, because you say, here's the risks, here's what it looks like, it's real, here's the real data, that kind of stuff, which is very difficult to do that. But that's the really, really important thing. And the second thing is being able to show it, make it real. And the third thing is about that, like you said, that adoption, that path from the prototype to production.
Yeah.
So you can't, those large organizations, that's a nightmare, right? It's really difficult to do, to go ahead and say,
you need to use the FOMO. You need to do the FOMO experience. Like, one department just does it. I love it so much, and they're the golden people. But I think that helps at an individual, and it's a journey, isn't it? So
it is.
And I'll use it depends. It's a journey. So for Ramona, she always have to get independent somewhere. But there's some things that are going to be outside of your control. Of getting their marketing department happy to go and do something or change that's going to need you to do what you need to. I suppose it only comes around if you've got a bit of bartering and go, well, hold on, I can provide you this now then, or you can get some more budget next year marketing for these things, because I'm going to save some money. We'll do it now then. No problem at all.
Or the other thing will happen, and they've got those 1, 2, and 3 organizations. The one's the AI natives, and the second one wants to change. If the second organization sees number one organization cutting their grass badly, then there's an impetus to actually do something. There's a bit like Microsoft did with the black belts, right? Here's a group of people inside Microsoft, right? You've got authority to go and change stuff, to break stuff. Go ahead and do it. Which I think most organizations need, but very few actually have the courage to do that. But if you've got an existential threat of a market coming in with a company that's a tenth your size, cutting your grass, which is we're going to start seeing happening more and more and more, because a lot of these 90% of most organizations' business processes aren't their IP, right? They're not a unique selling point for them. They're just cost of doing business. And if the cost of doing business in organization 1 is $1 million versus 100 million in organization 2, and they can start winning customers and all that kind of stuff, then there's an existential threat.
Yeah, and especially with the companies running out of runway on their funding and things like that, they need to be a bit more efficient with it. So
exactly right.
Yeah, exactly. So I think we're pretty much on the hour, and I've got to try and make my journey back to London again now. So
fingers crossed, dude. I hope
I hope so.
Snowshoes.
It wouldn't matter. I just didn't get Wi-Fi on the plane either. That was the way I could just carry on working. But I didn't have. And I'd seen all the films, and I'd talked to the woman about Oracle enough anyway. So it was like,
How are your Oracle shares doing, by the way?
I haven't got any. No. But and I haven't been plugging them. All right. John, thanks as always. I hope to see you on Wednesday. Really appreciate your views and sharing them with the audience. Thanks for all the questions. I think I got. I can't think Val might be next week. I think we got Sol's coming on soon as well, trying to work out a date for her, and there's probably there's probably some more in the pipeline as well, and I can't name them. So trying to get ahead. And I'm in Day-to-Day Texas next Friday. So if anyone in at Day-to-Day Texas, are we there? I've got to finish a presentation for that as well.
Chris, one thing from Ramon is that whole data to the process the data. We probably could do a whole panel on that, and that would be quite
Yeah.
because it really
it's
you can
a
always
good
have the whole
copy.
history of data and tech over the last 20 years because we've flipped between them, right? You know,
give me my next presentation with Big Data London next year, maybe.
they've just opened the papers, haven't they? Now, I think.
Oh God, it's never ending, isn't it? I need a break. All right, brilliant. Well, thanks again, John. Thanks everyone, and hope to see you all soon. Cheers.
Well, thank you for having me on, and thanks for the great questions.
No worries. It's been thanks for sharing. All right, we'll call it a wrap.
Cheers. Thanks, everyone.